Good afternoon, Nick. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Mashad. Thanks for inviting
Yes.
me to give this little talk
Of
with
course.
you.
Of course, it's a pleasure. It seems you're the first Purple Piper. I want you to talk about the topic that you would like to talk about, and you told me you chose we need a little more punk rock. Yeah? What does that supposed to mean? And let's just start with that and see how it goes.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, I thought I've been thinking about this idea. I mean, formally as I played in a lot of couple punk bands growing up, and that music taught me a lot. Formally, I don't know how to read music. I don't know. It taught me how to be a punk rocker. The music still resonates with me. And what I mean by we need a little bit more punk rock now that I'm an educator, um, I feel like that sort of attitude that brought punk rock to me is something that should be instilled a little bit more in education and particularly in design. I mean, how I got through this, I was always a punk rocker first, right? I always, that's if you read my bio, that is, I say I'm a Chicano artist, designer, educator, and a punk rocker. Like all of that is in one thing. And so when I say we need a little bit more punk rock, is as an educator and trying to teach design students, when I say we need a little bit more punk rock, is we need a little bit more of you. Punk rock is this idea that has these attitudes that maybe we'll touch on a little bit, is one of the foremost core, I think, if you consider it, its core values is for you to be free in there to do what you want to do. And as an educator, that's one of the things I strive to get students to be themselves, right? In graphic design, not to try to um, be something that they're not. It's a touchy thing because as an educator, we're teaching them how to some rules of graphic design and some rules of art, right? And there's correct place for those principles and all that. But in all of that, I'm not trying to make an assembly line of graphic designers that all make the same work, right? We're trying to get them to be, that's what I mean by we need a little bit more punk rock. We need you to take the things that you've been taught and seeing how you will formulate those and come up with whether they're new ideas, new designs, rather than follow what is trendy and hip at the moment.
Mhm.
And that attitude, and I call it this punk rock attitude because it is what made me like so. And there's a big parallel, and that's why when people ask me, well, how did you come across to design? And I said, well, I was just doing stuff for my band, making screen printing t-shirts and figuring out how you order, like make a sticker and a t-shirt, and how are we going to make the album cover and the cassette, like what you do, just the same way. I'm not a train, I don't know how to read music, sheet music. My friends were my best friend was he knew his father was a band teacher, so he knew how to he played the saxophone, he played a little bit of guitar, and but when we had this share interest of the music, it was just like starting, we're gonna start a band, and I'm like, I want to be with your, I want to play, but I don't know how to play. And he's like, oh, we'll figure it out. And that we'll figure it out is this thing that I tried to tell or tried to help students to know how to do that, right? To how we're going to figure it out. If you don't know how to do this thing in this application in Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, we're going to figure it out. You're going to figure it out, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of the the thing that I was saying about having we need a little bit more punk rock because when we started off as a band, it's not like it's similar to it's a creative field, so it's also just like being a designer and an artist. Nobody was telling us how to form a band. Nobody was telling us how to play the music. Nobody was telling us how to play your instrument. Nobody was telling us how you uh, make a record. Like you figure it out. That's where that other part of the you hear this DIY, do it yourself ethic is a big, that's really for a punk rock core that comes from there. Now you see it in like what are those home building renovation TV shows where there are like DIY your home and all that and do it yourself. Yes. But this idea really stems from punk rock of do it yourself. Nobody's going to tell you how to write your music. You just do it, right? And so that same philosophy I sort of try to take with my the students that yeah, we need to do this project, whatever the outcomes are, but um, ultimately is you need to be you, and that's really what I mean by
Speaking about that philosophy that you mentioned, let's talk about your classroom. And because that philosophy is very important, and this is something I really appreciate about your class because I had that experience. As you may know, I got my BFA in Iran and
Mhm,
I got my MFA here in America and I got my diploma in graphic design in art school in Iran. So it was a long career and I had so many teachers.
mhm.
But when I was looking through my career, I realized I only had two good teachers on my career, considering if I wanted to refer to them as a good teachers. One of them was in Iran during my BFA, and the other one was you here. How is it possible? Did you have good teachers that you want to copy the same style of teaching, or was it a personal thing that happened? And I'm referring to that because I learned a good amount of graphic design out of YouTube. And I never had the same experience with other teacher, and I am still using those techniques not only in my professional works but also in my teaching style. And I was always jealous of you. How can you do that based on different tastes? You're a specific, you know what should be deliverable, and you guide them through the semester. And you done the same thing to me, even though it was very hard for me because it was professionally was the first time I was dealing with typography, but you knew how to guide me to reach a specific step. And even though I wasn't very sure about that, but when I do that, when I do those comments, I realize, oh, that's what Nick is talking about and what's going to be the goal. So, how did you learn that? Did you have so many good teachers, or was it something personally you figured out?
Again, I'll probably be moving in and out from I don't necessarily separate my punk rock background to my educating background. Like they're to me, they kind of go hand in hand. And again, just going back a little bit about punk rock in general, that this space that you go into, as a especially, you start off as a youth, it was maybe eighth grade really when I got into punk rock. And so what is it, like 12, 13 years old, doing that and this idea that you're open about many things when you're in punk rock. When I say they allow you to be, whether you have a mohawk or a shaved head or you're poor or whatever you come from, there is no like there's not necessarily a label for that. And so similarly, when you go to as an educator for students, they're all coming from different backgrounds, the different upbringings, and I think those are core strengths rather than I think some students see it as a somewhat of a weakness, like, oh, like my father was not an artist or my mother was not an artist. And while those things help, obviously, because you get to see more things, I think the way that you grow up and where you grow up, right? You being an international student, having come and an international, I think there is strength that you bring from your upbringing, how you were brought up, what things you experienced, right? Experience is a big thing in there, and I'm glad for the things I've been was able to experience as a youth, as a punk rocker, playing in bands, going to go see other bands, and doing all the things that punk would be doing at that sort of time. And so taking students, I think I deliberately try to meet them where they are because there's going to be all different levels of whether you're in a sophomore level class or senior level, even within those classes, the students are at different levels in there, right? And so it does get challenging at times when you expect them to be at here and they're not. And so I try to pinpoint different um, what I perceive as their strengths of what they're really good at. Some might not be very good at digital typography, like picking a font and doing that. And so I try to give them restraints a little bit to see how they can function with just one typeface or two typefaces and see how that works. Or if they're not very good at laying that out, that maybe, and I see that they're a lot better at maybe illustrating things, then I say, how about we try to illustrate that? Try to find them where they are and bring that out in them. Because really, I mean, as we know, graphic design in general is very ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And there are things, the goal for the class or for the project that you're trying to get them to learn specific, there's outcomes in there. But ultimately, everybody, I go back to my punk rock roots. Is like, hey, there's different sounds, there's different bands. It's still punk rock and similar in art and design, there's different styles, different things that resonate that might not resonate a lot for me, but I can see the value in them, and so I try to meet the student where they're at for that point and see how we can get it out of them. And that's why I asked them a lot, and maybe I had asked it like, what is there in Iran, or where is this in this, if you're from Texas or from Kansas, tell me the one you probably noted a lot of the things is I tried to say like, what else do you, when you're not in class, what are you doing? What are the things that you see? Because I think because graphic design is everywhere around us, um, you can bring some of those aesthetics, visuals that you see. Punk rock, there was punk rocks, there's skateboarding for me too. Like those things go hand in hand, and then art and design go hand in hand. All of those things are all woven to me together, and I see those things influence me, and so I try to get, what are you into? Are you into outdoor stuff? Like, let's talk about those things and how you can bring those to this project or to whatever art project that they're working on. So I think the key is really getting them where they're at, seeing, trying to find out where their strengths, where they feel comfortable, and then at the same time tried to make them feel uncomfortable. I'm sure there was things in the class like I don't understand. Like just trust the process. Trust that I am. It's not like I'm trying to. I want them to fail, right? I want you to be successful. So if you trust me, trust the process that we're going through, then and then I say, then you'll be able to break things, right? I'm gonna let you break things, but I need to see where you're at for functionality purposes. I don't claim to be perfect at it, but I try to meet them where they're at, find strengths, try to bring in them, right? Going back to punk rock teaches you to be you. Like, okay, you be you. Don't worry what your classmate is doing. You do what you are doing and seeing where you can take it, right? Because one of the things, and I think you've seen in the classroom, it's hard when critiques are important. When you do a group critique, the tendency is that the students see what else everybody's doing and saying, I need to do that, rather than you don't need to be that. You can have um, get ideas, but it shouldn't look the same, right? And one of my big things for me is not letting students do the same project or whatever that somebody else is doing, because the tendency that I found is that most of them want to just copy that. It's like, oh, they're using that kind of typeface, so I'm going to use that one. I'm like, well, it was good for theirs. I don't know if it's good for yours, but let's see where you're going to go with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they also you're as an educator, it's not like you graduate from MFA school and then you're like, you're an educator, right? It's you learn
Right.
it over time. I feel like I still learn, especially with tech and software and apps. It's like, well, I got to learn that this year and like figure that how that stuff works to help the students. Obviously for myself too, I want to stay educated. So I think a good educator continues to we're going to be lifelong learners for the rest of our lives of just learn. I'm not even just talking about, graphic design and where it goes and all that, but wanting to learn how new things work, whether it's stuff about the environment, stuff in society, how that then is relevant to graphic design itself, right? Or art. Critiques are important, right? When we talk about like some students don't like it, sometimes they drag on longer. The critique is not who's right, who's wrong. It's let's talk about what we have in front of us. Obviously, when it comes to a setting in the classroom, there is a goal for the project, right? The project is to do this, to communicate this, and do this, right? How you get there, people can come from different areas, right? That's what makes it special. That's where we need a little bit more punk rock. We need you to instill that, right? And you can make the assignment be the same assignment every year. You're going to get um, a different view and perspective, which I think that is the great thing, like when in design. And again, it just goes to be open. I have had times too about where it's like I don't know what advice I could give you right now. Like the project isn't resonating with me, but it could be me because I don't understand it. And so there's a lot of what if that we say that we pose that question to the student, well, what if this happens? And I think that instance when we were doing that critique, I mean, we had a lot of critiques in your graduate work, but when I would come to see you, I think whether you're a motion designer or interaction designer or package designer, whatever you want to label it, if you're not experienced, you still know what the principles and core of principles of design are and how they function and how they can help whatever it is, whether it's moving something, motion, video, whatever it is. And so I think the other little side thing to that is when a student or like yourself were thinking about, I want to do this thing, I don't know if it's right or wrong, I'm going to have somebody critique it. Sometimes it just takes somebody else to look at it because you've been in this sort of tunnel vision
Yeah.
and, oh, it's going to look great. It's in my mind. And all the time, it happens to me too. In my mind, I'm like, oh, this is the best design I've ever, like, there's nothing wrong with it. And then somebody comes by, even, somebody else, even that's trained or not, as a designer or an artist can come and look at them like, oh, I don't see that. I see this as an upside down whatever. And you're like, that's not what it is. It's this. You're dumb or you don't know what you're talking about. It's not that. And then you step back and you're like, it actually does look that way, how they described it or whatever it is. And so sometimes it just takes an outside person to look at it. But as far as an educator, sometimes in the critiques, again, I don't go into it thinking I want to give the student more work. It's like, let's see what you got. Okay, that's one way to approach it. Okay, then let's go with that and see where it's at. And unfortunately with some students where they're still grasping these things, they might struggle. So they see the critique as a, they're just going to give me more work to do and all this stuff. But it's not like that to me. I don't see like, I actually enjoy it, especially in graduate school, because there's more theories, more things, less I'm going to make a final product, more let's think about the pot. What if this happened? What if this happened with it? And I really enjoy that from it. And of course, again, going back to you just will get better with experience. Both the student gets better with experience, the educator gets better with experience because you've seen that, you know? So I think it's a lifelong, again, you must as a designer, I think in general, and an artist, you need to be curious about a lot of things. And what I mean by that is just you need to know a little bit of something. Like when you don't know it, you research it out, you figure out what it is, and that's going back to the punk rock DIY again. We nobody told us how to play our instruments, how to make this music. I literally don't know. Like he had my friend had to tell me, okay, this chord is here, and you're going to play it 3 times here, and then go to the next note 3 times, and then we're going to repeat, you know. And so when you think about lifelong learning, this DIY ethic, you figure it out. You figure out the motion piece, like what if I do this? I want it to do this. Unfortunately, some things take longer than others, right? Like I have to render this thing. I can't see it through until I render it, and that's going to take till the next day. And so all of that stuff is in play. But I think just being curious about a lot of things and then just experience kind of comes and you just get better. The what if this, and think about possibilities. I tried to go into critiques not being um how would you say like I want to be open-minded about the thing. I know what the core goal are. Then I say, okay, well, that's a new approach. Okay, let's see how that would work out. Because obviously we have a responsibility as educators that ultimately these students are looking to get a job in the profession. So you're battling as an educator to give them a portfolio piece that will get them employed. And so that's always another, thing fighting about like, okay, I need to make it look some of these things like uh, product ready, but I really enjoy the process of getting to um, their final outcome, whatever that they've produced.
And Nick, let's come back to that trend topic that we were
Yeah.
talking earlier. And there is a very thin ice that I believe because you talked about we are responsible, and I'm not sure how much is level of that responsibility for them to get a job and providing them with a good portfolio. And with the trend stuff that you talked earlier, at some point, I totally agree, and that's my problem in some classes and in graphic design in general, that there are a lot of trends. And breaking that taboo for a student sometimes is hard.
Mhm.
For example, not necessarily among all of the typefaces that are available in universe, the best one is, for example, and I don't want to name it, but let's X typeface. Okay. What would happen? What if, again, like you said, what if you try that? But when we reach to the portfolio, there are some trends because they are looking, okay, I want to earn money and I want to go out there, and this is trend now. How should we bring that balance in class between breaking that taboo and experience something other than trends? And when we reach, we want to have a solid portfolio because we want them to be successful and find a job. Yeah.
Yeah.
How can we handle that? Or what's your approach to this in your
Yeah.
classrooms?
So ultimately, the my good design is always going to communicate whatever the outcome, whatever it is for, right? If you're designing a website, but the navigation is not functional,
Mhm.
that's bad design, right? So when we talk about trends, I'm more talking about like like you said, all right, everybody's using whatever X typeface. Everybody's using Futura right now. Everybody's using Helvetica. And
Mhm.
then in 5, 10 years, everybody now is using this, right? And those trends come and go. And it's not just the typeface, it's color, it's how they do it. Everybody's doing puffed up typography, and now everybody's using script typography. Like we see it. It's not like I'm not saying those are bad, but you sort of date yourself if you're following trends, meaning you date the design. So for specifically when you're doing uh, um, a big campaign for a product or organization, you want it to last, but do they need to last that long? Like is 10 years a long time or is 50 years a long time? Whatever, right? Like those things come and go. So ultimately, my thing for students is like good design is good design, meaning like it's functional, it is purposeful for whatever it needs to be. Does the package design, can it be simple because all I'm doing is putting chocolates in there? Or do I need to make this expansive box to just hold 2 pieces of chocolate? Like it seems unnecessary to have extra packaging just for the sake of making it pretty. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I mean by having good design. This is a motion piece function. Is it the pace enough? So to me, fighting those things is ultimately what is it for? What is it supposed to be a functional thing? If it's an experimental, there could be good experimental design. Like, okay, great, but ultimately design the difference, between I guess, what we would say art and graphic design is graphic design's ultimately whatever it needs to communicate rather than when I'm doing my studio art, it's Nick's voice. I'm just saying whatever. No, I'm not trying to communicate somebody else's message. It's mine, right? So ultimately, good design, I think, is will outlast trends. So that's to me when I tell students, it's like, well, are you using that because it's the first typeface on the most popular one on Adobe fonts because you're getting it free from your software, or because you really think that's the best one, right? And it's not a knock on Adobe fonts and all that. I mean, when that's the other thing that you probably heard me say to students, the first thing they do is go to Google, and when you're given an assignment and they go type in whatever it is,
Mhm.
and they stop at hit 1, 2, and 3, and then I tell them, how about go to hit
Sure.
1005 and see, and I bet you'll be the only one that went to 1005 on that search
They
engine.
will never do
And
that.
yeah, and so that gives you a different, because if everybody stops, the people, your students there in your home state and in Oklahoma and Boise, if we gave them the same project, I guarantee you they will do search 1, 2, and 3, and we can share those projects and they will almost look the same because they didn't take time to research beyond whatever the algorithm, which is really Google, is
Right.
feeding you that, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
True.
another thing about the trend stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And that's for education part. But I have this issue with again, come back to the we need more punk rock for
Yeah.
professional graphic designers. And I remember since I was very young, I had too many canons, and I still believe that even they were afraid to break their taboo. And I believe we need more punk rock over there too, because
Yeah.
they stick to their style for more than 30 years. And
Mhm.
speaking of Nick's voice, for example, let's say you want to stick to Nick's voice for how many years? And what would you afraid? What would happen if you just change that style? Are you gonna sell less? Is it just about money, or is it you're gonna be afraid you're not gonna be any more famous? So I have that problem over there too. So it's not just being in academic and you following trends, but even with the professional ones, uh, What's your view on that? Why it's gonna be like that? And specifically, we are talking about graphic design, but I know it's a issue on every industry. When you become famous, you want to stick to that because you don't want to lose fame and money and power and etc. But specifically in graphic designs,
Yeah, and unfortunately,
don't
our
think-
in graphic design, you're right. We need more punk rock and corporate and all that stuff because in some ways they trap themselves so much talking about like corporate professional design because there are standards, right? There's we establish web standards that for accessibility and how things function on the web. So you can only do certain things because that's the way the browser's going to work. So some standards are good, but do all of them have to conform to that standard? There's still experimental websites, there's still other things that happen, but unfortunately, I think in outside the money thing is a big thing because corporations are their responsibility to make money for their stockholders, right? So I'm sure there's that. When it comes to individual artists, I think there could be a little bit more freedom, but it's hard to when an artist gets hired for their style. Like I'm hiring you because you have this style that we like. I mean, how are you? People go to those artists because they want to have that illustration that's very geometric because that's the style you do, or because go to you because you do this lettering style. They want to go for you. That's like being picked for specific styles that people like, and that there's nothing. I mean, people make a living with that for them, but you're right that I think professionally we need a little bit more punk rock in that they need to let's try this now, and I
but
think
why do you personally believe, Nick, it's happening now? I mean, during 90s, okay, and I was born in 1986, but I remember at least what's happened in the 90s and early 20s, and I'm sure you're gonna remember that too. But why everything was brighter back then? Because corporate was still existing back then.
yeah,
But I remember, for example, Sony PlayStation had a better uh, advertising campaign back then compared of now. And I'm referring to that because I'm following Sony PlayStation's campaign. I'm super interested on that industry. But everything was brighter. We had better advertising campaigns for companies. We had better graphic design. We had better this, better that. What's happened? The corporate was existing back then. What,
yeah,
what's happening?
yeah. That
Is it just the style? I mean, the taste of people has changed, or what do you think is issue here?
there is the thing that I see that these corporations like the Sony, you're right, they had, I mean, that's brilliant, the just having the little X square, circle and triangle. Like, I mean, nobody can touch it. It's like, that's Sony, like, that nobody can
Simple.
touch
Yeah.
that. And I think a lot of those companies follow very closely to what their competitors are doing. So a good one is in fast food industry, if all the hamburger places try to be like have the same menu. Like if somebody says, I'm now going to do chicken and you didn't do chicken before, they're like, well, that competitors has chicken now. We're going to add chicken to our menu because they're all vying for the same consumer, right? The same style. And I think it's similar to the tech industry. You see that. I think Brian Collins has done the little chart where it's like all of them are in the blue gray and all a sans typography, and you look at them and you're like, yep, they're all like, if Meta, Facebook, or whatever changed their typeface to something else, then all of the ones that
All
are their competitors kind of shift a little bit for it. And I think it's this idea that they're all vying for the same consumer and they're doing that. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I think that has a little bit to do with it, obviously money. And I don't know. I think some are just scared to be a little punk rock and break the
is it
little
just money,
mold.
or is it just the people's taste have changed over the years? Because I believe, I mean, in 90s and again early 20s, we had better movies, we had better music, we had we had better of everything. And it
Mhm.
seems there were more punk rock back then, and
Yeah.
people was not afraid of experimenting with different things, as you were saying. What if we experience something like that? Maybe it's going to be a personal touch. And I believe every one of them, every one of those brands had a specific taste which was belonged to just them. But right now, as you're saying, everything is look same. Right now, every people are looking the same because they want to be successful on TikTok. You see
Yeah.
for example, girls following a specific makeups and boys just go.
That has been again that going back to the Google thing is that's an algorithm thing, right? That we know that you well they listen to you and all that, but if you searched whatever the makeup thing and then you're just going to get a bunch of feeds of what are the trending makeup things that Instagram is feeding you, and then there it's just going to go into
Right
that.
now, we can say algorithm. We are part of algorithm, and it seems we are living based on base of algorithms. Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, an algorithm, the same thing, the thing that they don't I think people, well, whether they know or not, but I think going on a web browser, the algorithm there, going on social media, the algorithm there, going to Spotify, whatever music algorithm. So you're getting all of these things, and maybe you're saying that thing where okay, back when you were growing up, you can see these crazier music or styles or colorful and all that. There's like what is Pantone's like the color of the year is green, and then next year the color of the year is brown. I'm like, what made it decide that? People thought, well, that's what's trending, right? And so people use that. Doesn't mean that we all think that that's the color of the year, right? But some group organization decided to say, hey, we're this is the standard there, and that's why we need a little more punk rock fight against those things and doing it your way, right? DIY way and being more of an individual rather than trying to conform
And
to.
that's why, again, I appreciate your approach on your classes. And I think because they are young, I mean, I'm talking about undergrads, and it's going to be a very perfect pinpoint on their mind that you're going to touch that spot on their mind, specifically through their early careers of becoming a professional designer. And you're referring to them, and you did the same for me. And again, my teacher in Iran did the same for me. What if I'm exploring and doing these kind of thing and not following the trends because I was afraid if this is going to be a trend, I want to be safe. And again, everything would be blindfold around my face, and I just follow that. I don't want to have that boring life, and I don't want to have that boring approach in industry. We are designers, and I mean, go have fun. Just observe and do something. What would happen if you pick something other than Helvetica? It's not going to be end of the world. It's not going to be Armageddon. Yeah. What if, as you said, go search on 500 page of Google and find other designer and see what would be the successful typography mean? Could be this. It's not just going to be, okay, the specific person is a canon in typography and I should follow that because he was successful 30 years ago. And that professional designer stick to the same style because they knew that if they're gonna just break that style, they're not gonna be famous too. So they became algorithms too. And I think that's the issue in graphic design nowadays. Everything is repetitive, everything is looking the same. And yeah,
Yeah, and a lot of that, the history part is just unfortunately, I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but when they make a volume of a graphic design history, it's usually the same couple areas in periods of time, and that's not discounting those designers at those time periods and Bauhaus and whatnot that they didn't contribute, but obviously we know that there is more out there from other countries, from other areas,
Hmm.
and that bring graphic design, and that's why that People's Archive is very important to get more students drawn there to go see uh, different approaches to design,
Yeah,
and it doesn't just have to be
yeah,
that way. And
yeah.
that's why I said it's so huge and how it is subjective in a way when you're an educator. It's like the rubric says that craft is this much and this is concept is this much, right? It's to get a grade, but that doesn't mean it's necessary. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things to instill in students. I get it when they're on scholarships and they have to get an A and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I almost want to be like, the first day of class, I will give you an A right now if you give me just effort throughout the whole semester. Like to me, that's more important to me to for you to explore process getting there because we could give all of our students A's. It doesn't do them any good if they don't understand concepts, the process, like how are they going to get a job,
I
right?
learned that from you, and I'm doing the same in my classes. I'm copying you. But honestly, I would say the same thing if you're turning it into a style. And I have a
And
problem
that's
right now
why
with the style. With the word of a style, it's bothering me right now because it is a style, and just you're gonna label it as a successful style, and that's gonna be a to-go option, you know?
well, yeah, think about this, Mashad, that as both of us are educators, think about, and this is what I think about, um, we're educating the next designers out there that are designing the world around us.
Hmm.
So, how do you want it to look? Do you want it to look like what is already there? And you still want it to look like the trend that's there or the whatever, however people think a sign should look like and how the website should look like? Or are you training them to think beyond that and find new ways to present what we think a sign should look like, what a poster should look like, right? Like nobody's stopping you from cutting holes into a poster. You're used to just seeing a poster full bleed and whatever the sign. Nobody's saying it can't be 3D. Why isn't it folded? Why isn't it doing that, right? Some of it, again, the billboard is the way the billboard because all the standard size is that and they're put out there. I get that, but you've even seen some billboards that now have well they have 3D or they have electronic billboards. You put motion things to them, right? So as an educator, we're training these new designers. The hope is they're doing their own, bringing their own voice, bringing in something new to design so we don't stay the same, right?
Yeah.
And that's why when I say design is everywhere, because somebody has to design the sign, the street signs, somebody has to design the type that goes on them, somebody has to design the way that certain things look when you go into a place in a new building. And so designers are important because they're working with other trades like architecture and housing and things like that. And yeah, I think it's important for any educator to really think about how you're preparing the students to think, obviously, think critically about whatever whatever project that they're working on, whether it's in school or when you're a professional, and it's going to be out there, right? It's going to be out in the world, and we're not going to stay young forever as educators. Eventually, you're teaching them and hope that they're making a better world for us to live in, not only just the visual parts like
No,
society
I
as a
totally
whole.
agree. Yeah, I totally agree. And sometimes I'm doing that, and but the problem is that not a problem, but I can feel that in my classes when I ask them to do that, to go further and explore or have a personal voice or whatever, some of them just react, I haven't done that before. It seems there is a safer spot, and I'm comfortable with that safer spot. And as long as I'm safe, I'm logically, this is a human nature. When we are safe, we don't want to change it. But I would say in design, you should break that taboo. And sometimes you want to be unsafe. As you said, maybe something's not going to work, and I'm not going to be a god, and I don't know necessarily every answer. Just try that, even try and have an experience. What would happen if I fail? Let's have a fail experience. Not necessarily everything would be successful or should be successful, but that's life. We all sometimes fall down, and you have to
Yeah.
learn to, okay, how, if I fall, how should I stand up? Just experiment that. But
Yeah.
it's safe. It's a safe typeface. It's a safe image. It's a safe color, etc. And I don't want to change that. And I always remember you would say, specifically in graphic design, if there is a knob, don't go from 1 to 3. Just go from 1 to 10. Okay, try it now. At
Yeah.
least try it now here and see what happens. If
Yeah,
you're supposed
yeah,
to
my
go,
big thing is having students do that. I'm glad you brought that up of turning up the line or the scale or the knob, however you want to say it, is that I want the students are a lot easier teachable if they go from 1 to 10.
mhm,
We can always tell them, all right, you went a little bit too far. Let's go back down to like maybe a 6 for this one, but
mhm,
maybe the next project you need to go to 10.
mhm,
And maybe a 3 is maybe appropriate, right? Meaning in the levels of how craziness, how experimental you want to get on there. And that's part of the reason, again, going back to educator, is I value the process and I put a percentage in the rubric more for process based that you did try 10 ideas, right? Rather than the one like I like it like this. And like that's one idea. What are we comparing it to? And it's not to give them more work for the sake of more work. It's the whole like, did you just Google and went to first search page and then that? Or did you keep going and then you went down this road and then you went down this road and then you went back to it and then you went way back this way? That shows curiosity and
mhm,
being curious about a lot of things because we know as designers there are multiple solutions that can work for
mhm,
the motion piece, for the website, for the product design. It's which one do we think will be the most successful with the outcomes, right? When on a professional level, you have people telling you it's the demographic, the persona, whatever. It's for 20-year-olds or this one's for 50-year-olds. And okay, there's a different design that you're targeting for them, right? I'm not understating any of those things. But even within that, when you have all of those metrics and everybody saying it's this, um, you still go with where you think because there's multiple possibilities, right? So it's not like a hamburger restaurant isn't new, but new hamburger restaurants come up all the time, right? And so how are you going to approach that one different than your next one that happens to be another hamburger restaurant, right? It's like, okay, we did that for the last one. It might not necessarily work for this one because their menu is different or their secret sauce is different than the one over there. And we have to, you can't cookie cutter a business or a design. And that's where, again, the punk rock to me is you need to add a little bit more punk rock attitude, whatever that is. Figure out that methodology for that. I personally like to, students don't like it, but I personally think that putting restrictions on projects, especially early on in freshman, sophomore, junior level, because then what happens is it allows the students to think creatively about how they're going to use their tools that they have because sometimes students just get overwhelmed with Illustrator and Photoshop have so many filters and tools. How can I know all of them? I'm like, you don't need to know all of them. It's like you can experiment with them to see what it will give you for you and how you can approach it. Just because you and I could take, we all designers for the most part use Adobe. I mean, some are going to Affinity and stuff, but if they're all doing it, and if we are all just using Gaussian blur, the filter,
Mhm.
it all looks the same. So that scale and ability of how Nick approaches Gaussian blur and how Mashad approaches Gaussian blur, that's what makes the difference and the thinking behind it. And that's why I tell students, don't just hit, it's not that Nick doesn't like the filters. It's like, what are you going to do with the
That
filter?
filter, yeah.
A million other students didn't just hit the same one and hit it there, right? And so that's where it comes in and how you restrain this stuff, right? You've probably witnessed having students, well, I don't know what to do if you're saying one typeface only or only use brush or only use ink on this one. I've never done them. Like it forces them. It's hard. They cry a little bit. And then by the end of it, they're like, then when you say, it becomes easier for them when you say, okay, now do whatever you want. Like on the last one, they're like, oh, well, I actually like the restriction now where I only had the one thing, right? So it's this kind of tug and pull all the time with as an educator with that. But I think those lessons learned when you're in a pinch, if the client says you can only use one color, you're like, think back to your class and like, oh yeah, I have designed a whole campaign with just one color. You're like, it's possible. And sometimes makes it a little bit harder. Then you got to think about values. Like, nobody said do a grayscale with color, and then they're like, "Oh, I can do that? Why not? Why not? What if, right? If it's one color, I just said one color. I didn't say you couldn't do values with it, right? And then you bring up other things. So there's definitely for my educations a lot as I approach coming up from doing a lot of studio work, studio art, that those same practices that I bring from there still carry over for graphic design. So using those formal things, I think students shouldn't forget about those things that they learned in drawing class, perspective and all that. How do they now take it if they're using, a digital application?
And my last question would be, as how much you're successful. I believe personally that you're a fantastic teacher, but you're successful in your professional career. I mean, the industry. I know you're designing posters for independent movies, and I'm happy it's independent movies because you can have your artistic approach. It's not going to be a silly Hollywood posters, but tell me a little about those experience. When did you start to connecting those people, or how much are you borrowing from that industry, and you think it's going to be successful on your teaching, or vice versa?
Yeah. So as far as I always think, like I said, I don't remove punk rock or uh, as a designer or artist. The life is always meshed together. So for that, those things world, they definitely anything I do informs my graphic design teaching. If I get really into something now, I try to think of a project where the students could possibly do it to show them that there is other thing other than a website, an app, a motion piece, a poster. Like, let's add to that, right? So definitely, and that's where when I started off talking about that, your particular perspective, how you grew up, where you grew up, um, really informs your life experiences, informs you, right? Where have you traveled, right? It does definitely, it's not impossible for somebody that's never left Idaho or never left Oklahoma to not be a good designer. It definitely helps open your eyes to see, like, whoa, like in the East Coast, this is how it's done. In Europe, this is how those same things are different. The food tastes different, like the music's different. Like, so understanding those experiences helps you be a better designer. That's why I'm sure you do this as you tell your students, like, go out there. What movies are you watching? What did you go to a concert? All of those things affect how you design in your project, your real life, your profession on there. I just happen to be lucky that I have friends that have made really good a lot of those posters are from a really good friend that has entrusted me to work and provide poster design work for him, and then him referring me to other filmmakers. And that's the thing about being a good person, a good that people like working with good people. Obviously, if you're a good designer and you are a crappy person, nobody's going to want to work with you, right? And that's another kind of thing that I instill, that I feel that punk rock gave me, is being good to everybody. I think punk rock gets um, a negative like impression from the media that it's just people with mohawks and they're out burning a house down. I'm not saying that's the probably doesn't happen, but I'm saying that I think punk rock is a lot to do with having positivity in general about people, whether you want to be a the style of punk rock that you want to do, or helping organize all of that stuff. All I just go back to that, to punk rock really gave me a lesson in how to be a good person, try to be open-minded to people, and willingness to put myself out there. Because anybody that's tried just similar to picking up an instrument and performing in front of people and going like, I don't know what I'm doing. It was like it resonates to me. I think the music is pretty good, but I don't know how the crowd's gonna go with it. And similar to making a project for students, is like they're nervous to show it to someone. I'm like, that's the best thing you could do, is show off your work. Like, not show off as trying to be arrogant, show off like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, look at that. And getting critiques by it.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I landed on myself. That's why I was kind of really happy about, doing this podcast thing, was because this idea I've just been, I mean, I've always had the punk rock thing in my mind, but really lately, so far as you are an educator now, and with your students, you see the need for a little bit more punk rock, a little bit more personality, rather than trying to conform to a certain thing, what we consider is graphic design, whatever that means to them. And and you see it in the public, in corporate design or professional design too, that hey, we need a little bit more punk rock over here. Like, let's not everybody, just because this big studio does it this way, that everybody has to do it that way. It's like, be a little bit more punk rock with that.
Mm. Your designs are always going to be punk rock, Nick, and it is always.
But thank
and
you.
I, and I was lucky to work with, I believe you are one of the successful, again, educators that have been so far in my life. And I was lucky that I worked with you. I learned a lot from you. And of course, you're famous in Idaho, because I always talk about you in my classes to my students, and I show your stuff, and you're still influencing me. And I just wanted to say it was an honor. It is always honor to talk with you. That's
No,
it.
thank you. Thank you for all the kind words. You were always a great student. I'm sure you're a great educator, because again, you were
Not
teachable, and
necessarily.
that's always a good sign of somebody that is teachable, that's humble to
Mhm.
learn, and humble to know. Like myself, I don't claim to know everything, and I sometimes I have to tell a student, like, I don't know the answer to that. Let's try to figure it out, or give me a day or something, like, let's research it out. But so I'm just grateful that I'm able to help there, and continue to. Nothing brings, I think, more joy to an educator than having seen their students be successful. I don't claim that my your success is directly from me, but I hope to have like a little bit like, oh, like you said, like, oh, Nick taught me this little thing here, and that stays with you. And I think just like my mentors before, their little things, their philosophy things, the way they've done it, uh, they've they've stuck with me. And some of the things that weren't taught to me, I tried to teach that. Like, I didn't learn that in school. I'm going to teach you this things in school, you know? So I appreciate the time. I hope that all your other, the guests that you end up having have uh, great things. I look forward to seeing what they talk about.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right, you too. See you later, man.